On this week's Bet the Process podcast, Rufus and I have on Jon Sherman, who does a blog called Practical Golf and has an unbelievable book on golf and does some coaching on the PGA Tour. We also have a deep dive into the amazing panel that I will be on at Sloan coming up Saturday. And we tease this whole idea of us doing a Bet the Process happy hour at Sloan on Friday night. So with that, let's start the process. Welcome to another episode of the Bet the Process podcast. This is the Sloan episode, the annual Sloan episode, because Sloan is this weekend and Sloan has become this, I think, almost like controversial now on the betting circuit, at least for like our OG listeners who think it's gone too mainstream. But I'm actually on a betting panel.
Wait,
We were so
Jeff,
close.
you're on a betting panel. Has this ever happened before at Sloan?
I haven't been on I haven't been a panelist on a betting panel in a while, actually.
Wait,
I
who's the
moderate
moderator of your panel?
Chad.
Okay. I have to say that, like, you're a great panelist, but you're also like a really, really good moderator.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but I'm actually like kind of looking forward to being a panelist this year. And in the I don't know much about. Do you know anything about Sean? Like on my podcast is Nate Silver and Sean
On your
Zarillo.
podcast, on your
I mean
panel?
on our panel, sorry. And
Sean who?
Zarillo from Action Network. I'll have to ask Mead about him. I don't really know much about him. Um, but anyway, so
Never heard of him.
the what's that?
I've never heard of this guy.
Well, he
Up to
is
Google.
someone. You
Okay.
know, I would. I mean, we're not even doing a pre-call for this, so I'm like interested in in how this is gonna go.
Reach out to Diggs and see what his opinion is first.
I know I never need to have an opinion. I just ask Diggs for his opinion, and that helps me have an opinion. So the working panel, the name of the panel is When the Odds Don't Add Up, Navigating Anomalies and Uncertainties in Sports Betting. And then the description is the rapidly evolving landscape of sports betting presents unique challenges for both bettors and bookmakers, especially as data anomalies and unexpected outcomes increasingly disrupt predictive models. This panel, featuring industry experts, will explore strategies for identifying and addressing situations when actual results deviate from model expectations. The panel will explore the implications of unusual betting patterns and dive into the sports betting challenges of the 2024 NFL season, where favorites won 72.1% of the time, the
No,
highest
wait,
winning
that's straight up,
percentage.
not against the spread,
I
I assume.
I don't know.
Did favorites? I don't think favorites covered 70%.
I would
That would
assume
be
I
insane.
would assume that is against the spread, Rufus, because
Really?
if it was against the money line, then would that even be
What said
notable?
favorites won?
I know, but I think the implication is that they covered.
Okay.
Do we even know if that's true?
I'm gonna look at I'm literally gonna query this right now.
All right, this is real time shit. I love
They
it.
favorites won straight up 71.1%. They won against the spread 53.8%. That doesn't seem like a crazy anomaly at all. I'm just gonna call bullshit.
Okay,
This
so
is
we're
I
this
just
is this
Googled
is,
favorites against the spread NFL 2024 and I got covers.com. So
do you have a data set that you can run this so we're not relying on public data and we can at least like say we have something?
yeah,
Because
I mean, this
this
is
would
gonna
be
be
the
close.
great.
It
By the
all
way,
depends on
this
what
is
line set you're using, clearly, but
spoiler alert.
I'm sure it's gonna be close.
Spoiler alert. You want me to come out of guns a blazing and say like this is the counter,
Ah,
right? Yeah,
yeah.
this is
Okay.
like okay,
Okay.
who cares, right? What should favorites have covered? Do you I mean like
50%, right?
no
Anything that's
no
not
no 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 no.
50% is an anomaly, I guess.
What should favorites have won at?
It all depends. It's going to be different every year though, because if you
I
have a
know,
lot
but
of small
what I'm
favorites,
saying
yeah,
is like it should be what they won at versus what the expectation of them winning, right?
exactly.
What the closing like so can you do that for me? Can you run that number for me?
Yeah, I could run that
I want to
before.
have information that nobody else has. And I don't think that
I'll give you that number.
I don't think that Nate, Chad, or Sean listen to this podcast. So we will have information that none of them have going into this and I will be equipped to look smart, which is all that I really care about.
I can
Okay,
I can I can give you that number before your panel. Your panel's Saturday or Friday?
Saturday.
Okay.
So can we go back to this? Like let's just throw this out because, anyways, that the reason that doesn't even matter is because if this had happened in a season, anyways, like let's say that for some reason there was just some weird anomaly that they'd covered 70% of the time or something like that, you know, you would say like, what? I mean, what would you make of that? And I guess almost like, which part of that description do you find interesting for a conversation?
Well,
Uh,
think about how many Sigma event that would be. I
how
mean,
many
I
would it
think
be?
that's like, I mean, we're talking like, I would guess at least like 5, 6 Sigma event.
So the likelihood of there not being something there is like pretty.
Yeah,
It's
I just
it's
don't.
pretty significant. So you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, if well, if they covered the spread
No,
71%
I
of the
know, I know,
time
I know, I
over
know.
almost 300
So
games,
okay,
that's what you're asking.
how about this? What Sigma event would it take for you to be like, okay, there's something here? Is it like a two Sigma event?
Well, no, I mean, I think we have to kind of approach this in a more Bayesian way and say what would be there, and then it, conditional on this theory that something could be there, and then having the Sigma event, then we can reckon
Okay, so
we. I mean, that should inform our opinion. Is my point.
the prior would have to be something like with more public money coming into the market is not actively, or like there's some like overs or something like that. There's some paradigm shift in football that's causing
Okay.
more like you'd want
Or
that.
unders. We've had paradigm shifts in the last
Right.
a
Okay.
paradigm shift, I should say, in the last few years where
Well,
offenses have struggled, right?
just say then, out of the blue, there was a one sigma event over the course of a season. You'd say like
One standard deviation, that's like totally normal.
that's what I'm saying. Like you'd say
That's what
like that's
last year, I mean, 53.8%. That means if you bet every single favorite against the spread at the close, you'd have made money.
right. Okay. So
That is an unusual event.
but that is not, is that enough for you to say like I should look into why this happened, or that's just
No,
noise?
I'd say that's noise. I
Okay.
mean, look, you can look at our college basketball records and be like, oh, this one month we returned
Okay. I got it. I got
12%,
it.
and the next month we returned negative
Okay.
1%. And we're talking about like a thousand bets.
I'm trying
And
to
there's,
get somewhere
yeah,
with this.
okay.
Okay. Two standard deviation event. Would you care?
It's a tough question because it depends. Like, is it just this season? Because, if you took like in any 30-day stretch,
Oh,
you could find,
over the course of a season, let's just say in this season, you look back and you see a two standard, like, so I guess what you're saying is
yeah, I mean, look,
you would start to look at different time series, like different periods. You'd like look if there was, so,
well, I was going to say anytime like I'm underperforming, I'm generally going to look into it and try to figure out if there's something I'm missing.
and by underperforming, when do you start saying you're underperforming? I guess that's so that's my question. My question is like there's variance where you just go that's variance,
Hmm.
and then there's wait, what the fuck is happening? And then there's like, and so what I would love to understand, or what I think is important to understand, is like, when do you start to go, okay, there's something happening here? And I know in blackjack there was a casino. I think I've told the story before. There was a casino in Chicago
The
called
missing ace story.
what's that?
Is this the missing ace story?
No, it was
No.
in the Grand. It was in Grand Victoria Casino in Chicago and Elgin, Illinois. They had one of the best blackjack games for Collins, which is what we did. They had a riverboat with probably 40 blackjack tables, all on one floor, all with $2,000 limits, all with like spaces you could jump in on. So you could just move around the whole place. You got spotters everywhere. But we would play so many hands there and get so much, and we lost the first whatever, I don't know, two, three, four trips we went there, and we just kept losing to the point where we were wondering, like, you know, are we getting cheated? So we did a session there where we would literally just count shoes and make sure that on average, they were ending at zero, or there was enough distribution of the counts that they made sense. And yeah, they did turn out to make sense. And we kept playing, and eventually we ended up winning there and doing quite well there. But like there was a point where we were like, this seems like it may not just be random variance. And so when you
If
what
you're a
is that moment
frequentist,
for
that's what
you?
you would say, right? I mean, like, oh, it's statistically significant, right? We've statistically significantly underperformed. We must say that this game is not fair, but that's the wrong way to look at it. There will
Yes.
always be things that statistically significant things that happen just due to randomness. If you think about it, like it'll happen, like something will show essentially a 1 in 100 event will happen 1 out of every 100 times.
Right.
Like, right. So I mean, look, someone wins the lottery. People win, like there's a million to one things that happen. Planes crash, right?
Okay,
There's
so let's say that
yeah,
for whatever reason you start to feel like this is statistically significant and or it's outside of uh the probability of what you would think, right? Like a two standard deviation event. What's the probability of a two standard deviation event? I don't even remember now. My brain's hurting.
a little under 5%, I think.
Okay, so a little under 5%. So um let's say that happens. What is your process then to solve this? This
What
is
is
the
my process?
it's a very
Yeah,
good it's actually one of the better questions.
I
We go
get.
back to this idea of non-stationarity. We go back to this, and the thing that I love about it is I can actually like tout my blackjack stuff because it's a moment where it's very different than blackjack, where blackjack is not non-stationary, right? Blackjack is
Blackjack's a closed system.
a closed
So
system, right?
basically for you, it was like, is this game rigged in some way? Is there
Yeah,
something wrong with the
yeah,
integrity of the game? That's
right,
that was your
right.
that and as long as there isn't, then you
Well,
can
just
be damn
describe
sure.
your process to me. Like describe how you would start going about like I guess the first thing you would let me walk you through what I believe your process is.
Okay.
The first thing you're going to do is see if there's bugs in your code. Because
Yeah,
like
that's a good point.
ultimately like you're doing some sort of like spot checking to make sure like there's not bugs in your code. Once
Yeah,
you
so
feel
what
like
I'll
there's
do if it's something like, if it's I think one worry is always something translating from, I guess, the model building to production, because there's a different you have different production code, because you don't want to build them, you don't want to like have to run every regression or everything, every single time when you're updating with a little bit of data, right? And so I would check and make sure the 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 production numbers look the same as when I ran the whole thing, like the code I wrote to build the model in the first place. So you know what I mean? Like I'd look and see what I produced in production today, and then I would see the next day I'd go run the same thing and get the prediction that the code would generate historically and make sure those line up. Like this was an issue we had once with NFL and college football second halves with something, because we had official play-by-play that we used uh, to build the model, and then in production, we were like scraping ESPN play by play, and that was when there was the infamous Cooper Rush example where I was classifying, plays where Cooper Rush threw the ball. The quarterback for Central Michigan, who's now on the Cowboys, his name was Rush, and I was like literally parsing out the syntax of the play by play, and so I classified every event that Cooper Rush was involved in as a running play. You know, that's an example of a bug you can find. So that's yes. The first step would be to look for bugs.
okay. Um then bugs and then I kind of get the general gist
Well,
of where this is going to go, but for this panel now that we've had this conversation, I do think it'll be interesting. I
wait,
think yeah.
wait. So you asked this question, then you said, "Oh, I guess you just look for bugs. That's it."
Well,
We
no,
didn't.
I mean I know a little bit about I mean, yeah, I'd love to hear your whole process. I'd actually love for you to be on this panel because I think you'd have a very interesting questions on it.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's interesting, and I think I would be I tend to be focused a little less on just the results and more
Right.
on why are the things happening. Um,
So I
and
think
so
inherently we'd be looking at like biases that we're seeing and what we're playing, like i.e. like are we playing more favorites than we thought? Or are we playing more? So you kind of look at that and you're trying to basically find an underlying reason. like
Something you could be missing.
our college football model struggled, and like we were always like the last like 2 years ago it really struggled. This past year it was probably a little bit better than break even. Um, but
But
I,
the
I
process model was very good this year.
yes, the Rufus heater. But I think 2 years ago there was a lot of thinking about how the clock changes could impact, the difference between, and like the biggest thing that, and this is obvious, but this is why probably like a lot of like black box models aren't very great, is because you need to really understand the underlying inputs to your model to
Yeah,
actually like understand how to reevaluate your model, meaning like the explainability of your model is probably really important. And so if there's just a bunch of features that go into your model and you don't even know like necessarily how they're all weighted or whatnot, like you're probably, it's not great, right?
correct.
So
But Jeff, to answer your question overall, though, I think there isn't really one process exactly, and maybe there should be. Maybe I should think a little bit more intelligently and rigorously about how to be more thoughtful and systematic in my approach to bad variance. And
no,
I don't
maybe you should
know.
just not have bad variance and just win all the time.
Well,
It's simple.
I'll say this, it's easy when things are going well. You know what? Nobody's
Right.
questioning anything when you're overperforming. But
Yeah.
it still is interesting.
Which
And I
which they
think
which they
with our
probably
college
should,
basketball
right?
this year, we've had a very good year, but we've still like we've run poorly on extra games, which you would think they'd be the
I'm well aware of that. Well
okay,
aware of
you
that.
think they'd be the least efficient market. And
I
so
know. I'm
how
well
much,
aware
and
of
we've
that.
talked like how much of that is just, we're not able to get much down on those, but how
Right.
much of that is bad variance? How much of that is like the fact that the data, there's more likely to be bad data there? When Alcorn State's playing Alabama A&M, I think, you know, we actually, well, we do some error checking in the play-by-play and inevitably have to remove some plays because we think the data uh, it doesn't pass, it doesn't validate properly, and so like the percentage data validation is worse in those games, but it's a tough question, and we've kind of had discussions about this a little bit, and we don't all necessarily agree.
Okay. Do we want to do our splash sports pick?
Yeah, we did decent with Shane Lowry, huh? Tied for 11th.
Yeah, it was okay.
I think we've been like top
Remember,
15 with every pick,
I
haven't
wanted
we?
Michael Kim, and I for a little while looked like he might win.
I know, and then he finished one place ahead or something like
Yeah,
that,
he
maybe
didn't
two
finish
strokes
very.
better
Yeah,
than Lowry.
I have my pick, and then tell me who you like, and then I
I'm gonna
have a pick.
I'm gonna pull up my market stock here and see so that I can give you my pick.
Mm-hmm.
But let's first hear your pick. And wait, also, are we doing, is it just the Arnold Palmer, or do we do Arnold Palmer and Puerto Rico this
No,
week?
just Arnold Palmer.
That's too bad.
My pick is a Georgia Bulldog.
Wait, don't, no. Okay. Who is it?
Russell Henley.
Okay. I was like, is it Henley? Um, I was like, it's not going to be Harris English.
Sepp
Um,
Straka's a Georgia Bulldog too, right?
yeah, right. I wouldn't like, okay. Henley, like, I make him 57 to 1. I don't love that. Just
Okay.
saying.
Okay.
Um,
Who do
so
you want to take?
I would say Sam Burns is a candidate here potentially, who I make 40 to 1. Although actually the market has Henley as a little bit more of a favorite than Burns, but I'm flipped on those guys. Another one I would consider potentially is a Fleetwood who I make 30 to 1. And I think this is definitely not the time to use a Xander.
No, of course
I think
not.
this is also potentially a time to use a Scotty or a Rory if we're gonna sit. I make this is a marquee
Elevated
event,
event. Yeah.
signature
Mhm.
event, whatever it's called.
All right,
So
I'm
you
fine
do
with
have the
Scotty.
big you do have the big purse. I make
I'm fine with
Scotty
Scotty or
look,
Rory.
I make Scotty plus 435. The market is like plus 350-ish. We don't show value there, but but I I just I don't know what other time we will have his odds will be shorter with a purse
Big
like
purse.
this, right?
Yeah. All right, let's do Scotty. I'm
Yeah,
in.
I mean another or Rory, who I actually am higher than market on, but I just hate betting on Rory because there's just too much scar tissue.
We're gonna have to bet on Rory at some point. Should we take Rory here? Feels like this is Rory's time. We'll take Rory.
I
Okay.
don't know. I saw him in the TGL. I watched the TGL, one of those TGL matches, and his he didn't look amazing. But again, that's I don't know how much
It's
to read
TGL.
into that.
Okay. Let's welcome in Jon Sherman to the Bet the Process podcast, and then we'll talk to you guys all on the other side. We now welcome in Jon Sherman to the Bet the Process podcast. Jon is a performance golf coach of some note, works with Mackenzie Hughes, and got to play a round of 18 with Rufus. So for those, did Rufus do what he always does? Were you guys playing any kind of games? Like were there like Rufus never understands the games, and you have to explain to him like how handicaps and strokes work. Specifically, if
I'm not
like
good enough.
I feel like there are a lot of smart people out there that don't understand the idea of how a handicap works in a like how your strokes get assigned in a situation where you're playing someone head up versus in a group where there's someone with a lower handicap than the person you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
No,
it always
it
gets
is
very
this
confusing.
it is amazing if you look at my Twitter feed how many people misunderstand how handicaps work. I don't recall that happening in our group. We were playing in this fun kind of group tournament, so we each had a separate partner that we were competing in this net tournament at this awesome event for Amalfi at Shadow Creek. It was pretty awesome. But yeah, we had a great day. I was mostly probably just asking him how he bets on sports for a living because I still can't wrap my head around that. Because full disclosure to
Allegedly,
all the
there's no
list,
documented proof
yeah,
that
there's
he's
no
actually a winner, so we don't know.
full
So,
disclosure to all the listeners. I'm a horrible bettor and I don't do it anymore because I'm so bad at it.
where are you based out of?
I live on Long Island, about an hour 15 east of New York City.
Got it.
So John is also the author of a great book called The Four Foundations of Golf, which I listened to the audiobook version, and it's full of really great advice that is relevant to an average golfer, or below average golfer like myself, and certainly like Jeff in terms of like how to improve your game.
I don't
How
think you're a
did you?
below average golfer, Rufus.
Well,
I mean, the average golfer is very bad.
it depends on how you're defining average. If it's the average golfer who plays, 20 rounds a year, I have no idea where I compare to them. But if it's anybody that's ever played a round of golf, I'm certainly above average.
Yeah.
And it's all so John, I guess first off, how did you sort of get into, I guess, the golf media space, and what has that journey kind of been like for you?
I mean, long story short, I'm 41 now. I've been playing golf since I was 12 and was, caught the bug very quickly and was obsessed with the game, but just never felt like I reached my potential as a junior player. I think I had a lot of natural talent that got me good at the game quickly, but I kind of fumbled under pressure in tournaments and lost my temper and just did a lot of stuff wrong that eventually really made me hate the game and had a really bad relationship with it in my 20s. And then, funny enough, when I became a dad and moved out of New York City, I kind of restarted fresh and undid a lot of the mistakes that I had done and learned some new things and finally got down to what I believed was my potential. I started playing it kind of at a scratch level. And I figured, I'm like, man, let me just start writing about this stuff because everything that I've been told about the golf swing and the quick tips and all that stuff never really helped me. And I think a lot of the things that better players kind of figure out, kind of playing skills, were really the untold secrets of golf. So I'm like, let me just start writing about this stuff. And I started a blog in 2015 called Practical Golf. No one paid attention to it for a while. And I mean, I won't bore you with all the details, but it took me I wrote hundreds of articles. Eventually that became my book, and the book kind of took things to another level. But essentially what I do is I try and coach golfers from a golfer's perspective. There's plenty of swing information out there. And the four topics that I really try and focus on are expectation management, which no one could get good enough at this game. How to practice effectively, the strategic elements, just how to pick smarter targets and club selections, and then what I would call my version of the mental game. I'm not a sports psychologist, but I know what it's like to be under pressure. I know what it's like to throw your club in disgust. I've made every mistake. I've been able to play at a pretty high level in tournaments the last 5 or 6 years. So yeah, I'm just trying to relay that experience again from a golfer's perspective. I felt like that voice wasn't really out there, and that was kind of my thesis in the beginning.
How do you sort of identify, I guess, when I don't want to say when you've hit your potential, but I think it feels like there's a lot of golfers, a lot of elite golfers that get to a certain level and, maybe they're a top 10 player in the world, maybe that's, top 50. And they say, okay, I need to take it to the next level. I'm going to try to change what I've been doing, make swing changes. I mean, you saw it with Tiger, the best, like greatest of all time, where he, was winning majors and then he decided to re-engineer his swing, and he did that multiple times. You saw it with like Ricky Fowler, and Padraig Harrington has done that a lot over the course of his career. How Now I know this isn't sort of your area as much, but what I mean, it's got to be so difficult to sort of, I guess, say this is kind of the pinnacle of where I can get to, sort of on the physical side of things. Is there a way, like, I mean, let's say I know, so you coach Mackenzie Hughes. Let's say he said, I want to try to like re-engineer my swing to get to that next level. Would you say that's a good idea for him, or how would you sort of evaluate that?
Well, we've had many long conversations about this over the last year and a half, but I think it's kind of like the question in golf. And there's a number of ways to look at it. So for most of us, it's like golf's this quest, like we can never conquer it. And you're always wondering, like, is what I have good enough or is there something better out there? And mostly that translates to the swing. But yeah, like I love not knowing the answer to that. So I might have peaked myself. I might have played the best golf I've ever played in my life. And from here on out, I might not get any better. I think about that a lot and how I'm gonna like gracefully accept that if that's the case. Or maybe in 2 years I'll figure something out and I'll get better. I think at the pro level, it's a really interesting question and a dangerous question because every golfer kind of has like a DNA with their swing and what they're capable of. So Mac, for example, he had, you would know the numbers better than me, but I would argue probably the best short game in professional golf in 2024 when you looked at his around the green and putting, like top three
He's very good there.
and really good. But the stats are clear. He needs to become a better ball striker off the tee and with his approach clubs. And he's been looking for that answer for a long time, but he's not willing to deconstruct his golf swing entirely because he's fairly risk averse. And we've talked about this a lot, and we share that philosophy. So it's so hard to, because you look at some players who make that change and they get to a higher level. And that's great. Like that's why you want to potentially embrace that. But then you look at stories like, Ricky Fowler, I think is one that's maybe a cautionary tale that he went backwards. You never really know the answer. Tiger, my view on Tiger is that he was going to do that no matter what. That's what made him the best, was that he was going to keep searching and figure out a way to do it. So yeah, I think it depends on the player. And honestly, you're good at assessing risk. I think everyone needs to look within and being like, we always talk about this on our podcast in terms of swing changes. What do I stand to gain and what do I stand to lose? And if the downside is massive, I wouldn't make that change. But if there's, you've spoken with a few people and be like, we really believe like it can get you to this level and it's a risk that's worth taking and the changes don't feel that crazy to you. You're not going to step up under pressure and feel like a totally different golfer. Then yeah, that might make sense. But there's not a right answer for everyone. You really have to take into account people's r risk aversion, where they stand. Like Mackenzie, for example, has been a very comfortable veteran PGA Tour player. He's been between, I don't know, 40 to 80th in the world rankings for a while. He wants to be in the top 30. So yeah, you have to say like, I'm willing to risk some short-term performance to hopefully get there. But at the same time, like, am I doing something that's going to like make me lost on the golf course? We try and navigate that. I don't think you get it right all the time, but it's such a, I don't know, it's kind of a question that keeps me up at night, to be honest with you.
You're reminding me of, I was on Full Swing, I think season one, where I think Joel Damon said someone's got to be the 100th best golfer in the
Yeah,
world, right?
yeah.
Like he's clearly, his goal isn't to be the number one golfer in the
Yeah.
world because he's realistic about that, right?
Yes.
Um, what about adding distance? I feel like a lot. I mean, clearly uh, distance is extremely important in the modern game.
Yep.
We had Corey Jez on last year. We've had him on a few times on the podcast, and he coaches Denny McCarthy, or
Yep.
worse with Denny McCarthy, I should say, on analytics. And he said that, well, if Denny just got, if Denny could just add like 10 yards, it would just transform his game. And how hard is it to do that without sort of losing what got you there in the first place, without sort of having negative effects in terms of accuracy and just losing your swing, so to speak?
So I've gone through this myself. You met me in person, Rufus. I'm very physically unimposing. I'm 5'8". I have short legs and short arms, and I've worked so hard at speed over the last 5 or 10 years because I like it. It's fun. There's a lot of, side benefits, health wise. And yeah, I've gotten up to like 110 without feeling like I'm swinging the club differently. So we know way more now about what creates speed and how to do it. So I think it is a worthy pursuit for most players. And there's, multiple roads you can go down based on where the deficiency is. So weight training, like 100% I'm on board. Like everyone should be lifting weights to some extent. That's not going to make your golf swing worse. For example, like I had a very deficient lower body. I skipped leg day for 15 years. So when I started doing squats and deadlifts and other things, I'm like, wow, I have more power and I can generate more speed. So I think doing a well-rounded approach where you're lifting weights, doing explosive training where you're like throwing the medicine balls, jumping, sprinting, honestly, just swinging your driver as hard as possible at the end of a session is very important because you kind of want to remove the governor from the golf cart is kind of the way I like to think of it. Um, there's upgrades in your actual technical elements of your golf swing you can make. There's a number of ways to go about this, and I've learned from guys like Mike Carroll, from the guys from TPI. But there's a few basic tenets, and that's your your power you're able to generate, your strength, your explosiveness. And I think these are all things you can train without destroying your golf swing. So I think traditionally golfers were terrified of this because they're like, oh no, I can't do bench press because I'm going to lose my feel in my short game. And I just think that's utter nonsense.
What do
Um,
you remember when Carl Pedersen, the golfer?
yeah.
He was very overweight, had a belly, and he apparently, once he lost that weight, his game went to shit, and he like couldn't putt with he was used to having his belly there for putting. And so he gained the weight back and kind of went back to where he was before.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously examples in all sports of like athletes who've gotten by without like, I mean, there's tons of pitchers in Major League history. You've looked at them being like, all right, they just have something that everyone else doesn't, while everyone else has to work harder for it. But
Bartolo
yeah,
Colon.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm thinking of oh, who's the lefty on the Yankees? The rubber arm. What was his name? You'll remember it before I do. But anyway, I
Rubber arm.
think yeah, they always said he had a rubber arm.
I did
David
too.
Wells. David
David
Wells.
Wells. Okay.
Yeah. Um, I think that for most golfers, and I really do focus more on the average player for these things, I would start with weight training and the explosiveness stuff. Like there's products like Super Speed Golf on the stack where you're swinging this weighted club really fast. I've done that before myself. I think some people need to be careful with injuries. But yeah, I think there's really smart ways to gain speed without feeling you've lost the DNA of your golf swing. There's a lot of really good information out there on how to do it, and you don't have to like go at it 100%. You kind of gradually work your way in so it's not this shock to your system.
I just want to swing it like Jake Knapp, honestly. You look at
Yeah.
him, he gets an amazing amount of swing speed, and it doesn't look like he's swinging hard at all.
Yeah, and that guy like gets after it in the weight room. Like look at videos of him like the weights he's pushing. Like he's incredibly strong. And strength isn't like the only thing, but it helps.
I mean, what about like an Akshay Bhatia or someone like that like, you know, skinny guy?
Yeah.
He
I
moves.
have a buddy who's 6'4", long arms, long legs, never trained for speed in his life, and he can swing 115, 118, no problem. And I'm like literally working my ass off to just get like 2 miles an hour. So some people have natural tendencies to create speed, and some people have to work harder for it. But there's no question that if you want to play professional golf at this point, that you better be doing it because I mean you see the numbers every week. Look at your Molly. You're not going to be able to play professional golf in 5 years if your ball speed isn't over 180 miles an hour likely. I think 170 was the line in the sand a few years ago, and it's just going to keep moving. I think we'll reach a point where it saturates. Like I think low 190s is like the limit where you can play at that speed and keep it in play. I think Bryson kind of touched on it and went backwards. But I think, yeah, if you want to play pro golf, like unless you just have incredible iron play and short game, like you need to be there.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of Andrew Putnams and Brendan Todds out there anymore.
No, and that's, some people get angry about that, but I mean, look at the NFL or the NBA. Like, do you see any like slow guys who can't jump or like rush around an offensive lineman with incredible speed and power?
Yeah.
It's still a sport, and like we just, golf's late to the party on a lot of things. So I think they were very late to the party on the fitness part of it.
So I guess transitioning towards, I guess, your area of expertise more.
But
I mean, you're
Rufus,
an
can I ask
expert at
one
all
question?
this. Yeah,
Rufus, can
sure.
I ask one question on that? So, John, if you think about that aspect of things, right, which is how much distance matters, and you think about what the PGA is doing or thinking about doing with rolling back the ball or what they're doing, is this something in your mind that the PGA Tour should fight, or is it just the reality of like just as you're saying, every sport like it evolves and like I mean, it's not dissimilar to what's happening in the NBA at some level where 3-point shooting is
Yep.
taking over, people getting smarter. That's less strength than it is people understanding the optimal way to play a game. And in some respects, that's the same thing with golf, right? People are realizing how much distance matters, and that's the optimal way to play a game. If you were put your PGA Tour hat on, your CEO commissioner, do you do something about that?
Yeah. So my view on it is that, the genie's out of the bottle, so you can't unlearn like what we know about distance and its value. Like it just wasn't understood for many, many, many decades. Like Jack Nicklaus knew it. He was a long hitter. He knew it was an advantage, but not everyone understood it or knew even how to train for it. So it sounds like they are going to roll the ball back. I still think that's not going to change who's at the top of leaderboards. Like Rory McIlroy or people who can hit driver like him will still be at an advantage. Maybe it changes the design of the golf courses and what courses they can play. I personally don't have a huge issue with them rolling the ball back at the professional level. It's not going to materially change the outcome of tournaments, in my opinion. I just have the issue of, I play a lot of amateur tournaments. Like I have an issue with what it could create for the recreational game and the kind of drawback there. That's a whole other discussion. But yeah, I just, the NBA, like I have a hard time watching the NBA because of the 3-point stuff, to be honest with you. Like the game changed, and I understand people don't like what happened with distance in golf, but I just I don't know unless you disproportionately design equipment to penalize someone for swinging faster. They could change spin rates, they can change equipment. I don't think they'll go that far, but rolling the ball back 10 or 15 yards is kind of like I don't know. It's kind of like a nothing burger in my opinion. It won't materially change the game that much. That's just my view on it. I might be wrong.
Okay. So going sort of to the mental side, strategic practice stuff, how how has your experience informed your view that there's sort of a need for that type of coaching?
I'll start with the mental part of it, and I'll speak to again the average golfer. So, a typical golfer, what do? They're working during the week and they're fantasizing about playing golf on Saturday with their buddies. So they have this, literally a fantasy in their mind on how they're going to play. They're hitting great shots, they're sinking putts, and eventually they end up playing, and golf does what it does. It gives you a reality that's a stark difference to that that fantasy you had in your brain. Like humans are really good at creating these like clear images of what we want. And unfortunately, that disconnect leads to a lot of anger, frustration, anxiety, and all the other crap that can happen to us on the golf course. And I struggled with that badly for a really long time. So the the main mission that I'm on is helping people wrap their heads around what good golf looks like for their skill level or their even their time commitment to the game. A lot of people go out there simply wanting to play a type of game that is just so unrealistic for them. And when that reality disconnects, they absolutely lose their minds. So I try and bridge that, whether it's through statistics, um, letting people understand, like, well, this is what breaking 100 looks like. This is what a good shot for someone shooting in the 80s looks like from 100 yards, and just sharing anecdotal stories. And people start wrapping their heads. They're like, oh, I'm beating myself up for stuff that's actually good. And when you change someone's perspective and they have that freedom when they tee off, they can have more fun. And more importantly, they can choose smarter targets. It just kind of removes this burden that we all place on ourselves. And I think of all the topics I explore, like expectation management is probably the most powerful for people because when you get that right, everything else can start falling into place.
Do you think this translates outside of the golf course to everyday life in a way?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I think like,
his your ability to control your emotions and find joy in the game of golf improved your life as a whole?
yeah, I think it's kind of become a joke, but I'll tweet things and then someone will respond, well, this is great golf advice. And I'm like, well, golf is life. It's this great like teacher because it's chaotic, it's random, it's volatile, it feels unfair at times. Um, we, care deeply about something and it doesn't turn out the way we want it. So I've gotten many hard lessons on the golf course, and I think like it's made me a better dad, husband, friend, business person. So, I don't know if I'll ever write the book, but I really do want to write a book called Golf is Life and just draw parallels with like what we can learn from this game and apply to regular life. But yeah, man, if I often wonder like what would happen if I didn't hadn't taken up the game when I was a little kid, like what my life would look like. It'd be really different. I don't think it'd be as, not that I have a perfect life, but I don't think it would be as, great as it's been because of this game, what it's done for me.
How good are most professional golfers in terms of expectation management and setting proper targets in their mental game?
I would say based on what I know, like a lot of them are very bad at it, but that's also what drives them too. Like I don't think we fully understand, there was that 10,000 hour rule thing that kind of came and went. I just have this belief that we don't fully understand what makes, the elite athletes and golfers like why they are able to do what they are with their bodies and minds. Like I think they have some, of course they all work hard. That's a given, but I think they all have something that we can't put our finger on just yet. I don't think they fully understand it. But a lot of them, because they're so great and they're so competitive, they absolutely beat the living daylights out of themselves. Like nothing is ever good enough. Playing pro golf for a living is a really difficult thing to do because it's this zero-sum game. You don't have a team. You're constantly surrounded by your competition all the time, and you have this, this number that comes out every day where you're comparing yourself against each other. And that makes it really hard to have a good attitude, deal with slumps, missing cuts, blowing it when you have a chance to win. So, yeah, I think a lot of pro golfers are not good at this. I think that's why you see more and more of them seeking help from performance coaches and sports psychologists because it can be lonely at times, and it's not a great like mental health thing at times as well. So, yeah, I think the ones who are really good at it have an edge. And I see the ones that aren't as good at it, like their physical skills can override that, no question, but they don't ever reach their potential because they just absolutely lose it when their expectations don't line up with, what they're capable of in that moment. It's really hard.
Yeah. So Jeff is a big connoisseur of Kyle Shanahan's fourth down decision making in NFL football. And
Nice.
I can't help but kind of feel there's a parallel there where he can be so good at so many things as a coach, but he has this one blind spot. And somehow, it's the things that make you a good play caller and great at designing these creative plays aren't the same things that help you make the proper analytical decisions. What are sort of the big blind spots for golfers, for professionals? Like,
You mean from like a decision making standpoint, or
yeah,
just,
like
you know?
okay, so let's say you take an average PGA Tour golfer, where and you begin working with them. Where are you going to be able to provide the biggest benefit to them in terms of, I guess I was going to say strokes, but maybe in terms of FedEx Cup points, money earned.
I think golf in general, especially at the pro game, is really like one big test of control. So most people who are attracted to golf love to be in control. The things that they've done well elsewhere in life attracts them to this game. And then we have, these volatile results where it's very normal for, you mentioned Jake Knapp. He shot a 59 last week, and then the next day I think he shot a 70 or 71. So
Yeah,
it's
he
very
needed his
normal.
59 to be in the fourth round, so he didn't have to
Yeah,
deal with the mental
exactly.
consequences of it the next day.
Wrong day.
Yeah.
So it's very normal for these, guys and women on the LPGA tour to have like crazy swings in between rounds, or they have moments where like they go on a 4, 5, 6 week, run, everything feels easy. And then like 2 weeks later, like, man, my swing feels like absolute crap. So I think a starting point is, and this is a life thing too, right? If you're able to draw that line between like what's within your control and what's not, and humans have been saying this for thousands of years, Stoicism, I know you study Buddhism, like this is like the concept. And if you're at that level and you can get really good, like Scotty Scheffler's a perfect example. Like this guy, we had Ted Scott on our podcast, and like I just think the combination of what they have is so special. And like they are absolutely killing it in the control category. They place their emphasis, their feelings, their passion on what's within their control, and the rest of it they just kind of let slip off. And that sounds easy to do, but it is, working with a PGA Tour player, it's literally a daily battle to fight that. And when you get better at that, I think that's more made cuts. Having a feeling on a Friday afternoon where you have an 8 footer and you can actually get up to that putt and be okay with missing it and just go through your process. Again, things that people say, everyone says the right things, but actually being able to do it, um, I absolutely, I can't prove it, but I know that my belief is that because Mackenzie Hughes was so much better at that last year, he had a way more consistent season and made more cuts. And that's why he got picked for the President's Cup team. He didn't, we wanted him to win. Obviously, he had some chances. It didn't happen. But I believe that him having an incredible attitude and placing emphasis on this gave him an edge and it kind of smoothed out his performance. And it really depends on the player. But yeah, I would really start with like drawing the line on a very basic level of like, what are you good at controlling and using your emotional energy towards, and then not wasting time beating yourself up and causing yourself a lot of heartache on stuff that's genuinely outside of your control. And people who are really good at something have a hard time doing that. Sorry, that's a very long-winded
Oh,
answer,
no, I
but
love that. And by the way, it's kind of crazy to think that Scotty Scheffler kind of had an attitude problem at one point playing golf. I mean, I learned this
yeah,
from watching Full Swing that Ted
yeah,
Scott
he,
said, if I'm going to work with you, you're going to need to change your attitude.
yeah, I think Ted is one of the rare, caddying on the PGA Tour is not as easy as most people think it is, but he's, the names that we hear, like Ted's a coach. He's not like he would kind of defer, be like, oh, it's all Scotty, but like that guy's got a special way of like set the way he says things in certain moments. Like he's a skilled coach. And I think that is the perfect combination. And what you see is a guy who has generational ball striking skills and I think a generational like attitude also at this point. So when you put all that together, you get the best player in the world. But everyone else chasing them, like they need to do these things as well. And yeah, if you are someone who tees off on Friday morning and is going to pack it in after 6 holes when you feel like you don't have it versus the player who's just not going to give up and figure out a way to keep fighting and making good decisions. Like, yeah, I believe that player will make more cuts and more money in the long run.
Do you think a player that is more advanced in this area and understanding what they can and can't control, resilience, do you think that difference is magnified under pressure? The difference between them and someone who's, maybe like an Alejandro Tosti or someone that just seems to at least not be a
Love that
fully.
guy. Love that
He's
guy.
great. Yeah. Or I mean, if you look at a guy like Toasty or even like a John Rahm, do you sort of see like, oh, they could be a lot better if they could control their emotions, or there's some players where it's like they need that fire and they play better? Sorry, those were
So
two
I think,
questions.
yeah, I think that that's like the interesting thing because, like, just like I said, we all have swing DNA. I also think we all have like emotional intelligence and personality DNA. So, like, I think Spieth and Tiger are really good examples of two players who, at their peak, obviously Tiger's peak was a lot longer than Spieth's, but like they would let like pressure out of the balloon. Like Tiger would visibly be upset, Spieth would get angry, but they were really good at letting that out and then getting on to the next shot, and it was behind them quickly. Now, I would say, like, again, I don't know John Rahm well, but like I watched a lot of his golf. I would say that his Achilles heel was that he would let that emotion out and then it would drag on for many holes and he wouldn't let it past him. So I think there's certain players who, do better with like the more even-keeled approach. And then there's other players who like, yeah, I've got a personality, I'm going to show it. I'm going to let some emotion out, but when the next shot comes, like I'll be ready to go. So I don't think there's one recipe for everyone, but everyone does bring their like baggage from their personal life on the golf course, and it's hard to manage. So I just I think when you get out of balance is the issue. So if you're the player who, yeah, likes to show emotion and it becomes way too extreme, then you've got a problem. But then if you go in the opposite direction and you try and be a robot out there, that's probably not going to work for you either. So you need to find like I'm always about balance, like, and this is something that Mackenzie and I talk about a lot, like what's his balance look like? Because he can get to the too serious side where he's just like a robot. And that's not good for him because then he
He is
can't let,
Canadian.
yeah, well, the Canadians, some of them love to tell jokes all the time, but again, that's his personality. I think he goes to the dark side when he's way too serious. So we've had to be like, hey man, can you be a little playful and crack some jokes out there when you're feeling like a little too tense? So yeah, I never stopped being fascinated by this stuff just because there's no one right way to do it.
How much, Jeff, did you have something you wanted to add?
No,
I
no.
was gonna say, how much does play on the driving range and sort of in practice rounds translate to the course? We've
That
had
that
Michael
yeah,
Collins on before, and he basically said, not at all. Like guys he caddied for, they could have awful rounds or awful practice sessions, and then they get on the course and they have great rounds. And he was like, it's amazing that there's like no connection sometimes. But
Yeah, I've never found. So the one thing that there's a great quote from Tiger a few years ago at the Masters where he had a good first round and they're like, well, how was your warm up? He's like, it was terrible, but I remember what my dad said to me, like, did you get warmed up? Did you accomplish the task? Great. So I think a lot of golfers use their like range session before their round as a litmus test on how the day is going to go. And I've never found any correlation. I mean, 2 years ago, I showed up to a US Mid-Am qualifier. My game wasn't very sharp. I was dealing with the chipping yips, like literally blading balls all over the practice screen. And I was just like, well, I don't know what's going to happen today. I shot a 68 and won a USGA medal. I mean, how does that happen? Like, it's just, you don't know. But I was prepared to go out there. I wasn't stepping up to the first tee being like, oh man, your game's a disaster. Like, you can't play. I just kind of used my experience being like, well, I got my body ready. Let's just see what happens if I do all the things that I know I want to do. So I think a lot of golfers will step up to the first tee like terrified if they don't hit the ball well on the range, or vice versa. If they're striping it, then they're expecting to like shoot their best round ever. And I'm just not a fan of using anything that occurs too much in your practice session or warm-up session to like predict what's going to happen. Get your body ready, hit some balls. If I notice I was missing everything to the right, I'll file that away. And if I see it on the course, then I'll make some adjustments. But no, long story short, it's just the Tiger quote. Like, did you get your body ready? Yes. Okay. Now you can go to the first tee.
Speaking of the
Okay.
first tee, do you remember your tee shot on the first hole we played together?
Yes. So I topped it. And the funny thing is a crazy thing about this game is that so my driver's been my best club for like the last 5 years. Just really, really great driver of the golf ball when I used to be terrible. I haven't topped a tee shot in probably like 8 or 9 years. And literally a month before we played, I was playing in the Long Island Mid-Am, and I topped my opening tee shot of that tournament right into the fescue and made an amazing bogey. And I was like, huh, that was funny. And then when we played, I did it again. I haven't done it since, thankfully, but it just shows you that you never know what's going to happen. And internally, like my response to that was, okay, that was embarrassing, but whatever. I'm just going to go on with the day and, that's it.
Well, that loosened me up because I was like, you know
Yeah.
what? I'm always afraid of doing something like that, but I was
Yeah.
very impressed at how you mentally handled that.
My
So
view is that I have embarrassed myself more times than I can count. So at this point, I'm just kind of not that I don't worry what other people think about me. Of course I do. I'm a human, but I've done enough things on the course to make me look like an idiot that I'm like, well, what else can this game throw at me? So yeah, I topped the drive, whatever.
one last question before we get you out of here, and this is like I think over the last probably 5 years, professional golfers have taken on quite a bit of different ways to try to get alpha, whether it's like a flexibility coach, or whether it's analytics like Corey Jazz, or a mental coach, or all that kind of stuff. What would you say the best way for, or like strength training, or what is the best way for a PGA pro, the average PGA pro? Now, obviously, everyone's different. Like someone, it's going to be obvious where they should get their alpha, but where would you say universally would be the way that a good, PGA pro could get alpha right now, where they could take, an average into a top?
I mean, the money's in iron and driver. I mean, obviously, like I'll never shy as much as I try and help with everything outside of the golf swing. If you want to make a boatload of money in professional golf, like you need to hit your driver and irons really well. So if that was something that was deficient, then yeah, if it were me, like I'd be looking to hopefully work with a swing instructor who can help me there. But the main thing that I think is different is that so the competition's getting fiercer and fiercer. Like there's kids coming out at 20 who are ready to go, and they're taking spots from veteran PGA Tour players like every year. And I think that having like the concept of a team, not where you're just like constantly surrounded by people, but pro golf is like really lonely. Like I would want someone I could talk to, at least like let out some steam about what happened in my rounds. Yeah, I would have a stats guy who I could say, are there 2 or 3 shots this week where I can make a better decision that I not might not have known about? And at the end of the year, that might be the difference of me winning or keeping my card. So I think the combination of like not ignoring what's going on up here and making sure you're optimized with the strategy stuff and in the weight room and all that, like it to me, it's a no-brainer. Like I'm never going to play pro golf. I'm not good enough. But if I were, like I would be checking off all those boxes because I know everyone else is. And I think to answer your question, like where's the most alpha? I don't know. It depends on the player.
Yeah.
Like we know what the formula is. Like everyone is picked apart like the stats at this point and like who are all the best players right now? Xander, Scotty, uh, but DeChambeau, like they're knocking the piss out of the ball off the tee. They have incredible iron play. Like their putters get hot. Like the the formula in terms of your skill set is very clear. Now it's a question of how you all arrive at it and then how you separate yourself, I think, up here. Like I don't you can't measure like mental strokes gained, but it's there. And I'd be making damn sure that I'm having an edge there as well.
Strokes gained grit. You
Yeah, I
said you
mean,
can't measure
it's
that, but can you give me a top five right now and of your top five strokes gained grit?
I I don't know, to be honest with you. It'd be hard. I'd have to sit down and think about that one, but I've often like watched certain players. I'm like very careful with what names I say now publicly, but there's some players I've seen over the years where you're just like, I wonder if they had a different approach, how the outcome would have been like mentally. And Tiger was the best at everything. And like I said, he was able to like show emotion, but then be locked in very quickly. And I think when you watch some of the players who fumbled, like that distinction has like that line gets crossed way too many times. And I just wonder, like, did they have someone to talk to? Was it an experience in their child? Like Tiger had his dad, who like arguably was very influential in that. So, um, yeah, I don't know if I could reveal that list right now, but I have some thoughts.
Off air.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John, for joining us. Learned a lot about how I'm going to become better at golf, which will take a lot of practice. So we'll
Have
talk to
more
you.
fun doing it. That's my hope for everyone. Have more fun doing it first.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
That was our interview with Jon Sherman, who is interesting, very interesting. A lot of the mental aspects of things, and he's very smart. I could tell about just this, like I can see why he's a good coach, thoughtful, well-spoken, etc.
It
Forward.
is interesting how the sort of stoic slash Buddhist slash process focused
Yeah.
approach
Well, it's
seems to
the
be common it seems like to be key to success. It seems to be a key to success in a lot of areas. And I think it's true in betting, it's true in golf, it's true in business, to be able to understand what you can and can't control and focus on only on the things you can control.
yeah, agreed. Very interesting to think about what you can't control and be okay with that, right? That is like the nutshell, the gambler, the variance question that we even talked about. It's like you can't control some of that, and then ultimately, how do you evaluate what you can control? So, I'm going to see you pretty soon, in a couple days, right? That'll be fun.
Yeah, when do you get to Boston?
Friday morning. I'm taking a red
Okay.
eye in, and then
Oh,
so
you won't be there. You won't be there for Rochambeau tomorrow night, huh?
I'm not going to be there for
Uh,
Rochambeau tomorrow night. I am coming in. My wife gets home tomorrow night, so I have to leave after she gets home, and I will take a red eye, go straight to the conference, spend the day at the conference, and then maybe we'll still have a happy hour, even though we haven't been able to find a sponsor. Sadly, we'll find somewhere. Like if people are going to
we
be
can,
there, reach out to us and tell us. We'd love to see you.
yeah.
Just have to find someone willing to pony up $2,500, and we can actually
Or
have
we
a.
could just, or we could just do it ourselves. Is it,
I pay for the dinner every year, Rufus.
wait,
It's like
you pay with podcast money.
no, I don't. I pay with my own money.
That okay. I'll find
95%
the
of the
proof
time I
for
pay
you.
with my what?
Yeah.
No, there have been times I've paid with podcast money. Last year I paid 100% with my own money. So
No, I thought last year was podcast money.
no, last year I paid 100% with my own money. I
Okay.
actually asked you if you wanted to split it with me, and you sounded kind of sheepish about it, so I didn't ask you to split it with me. So, but anyways, that's inside baseball. We'll talk to you guys all again next week. If you're going to be at Sloan, DM us, reach out to us. Love to meet you. Love to talk to you. If you're interested in coming by a happy hour on Friday, let us know. And we'll talk to you guys all again in a little bit.
And by the way, it is the Jeff Ma Saturday dinner, not the Bet the Process
That's
Saturday
fine.
dinner.
That's
But
fine.
I'm
And I
happy to
get to
help for
control
sure.
who goes. Then I get to control who goes. So
It's true. I won't be getting an invite this year.
see you guys all.